Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to call this special meeting of Municipal Council for the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal to order. And just before I call for the motion to approve the agenda, I'm just going to make a couple of introductory remarks. So first of all, for the press, I just want you to know that even though the agenda is going to be approved, we're going to have to deviate a little bit from the order in which we deal with the agenda, because we have a meeting, a telephone conference meeting with our lawyer. It'll take place about 1:45. We're kind of locked into that time frame because he has another appointment.
Yes.
So we'll be deviating from the agenda.
Okay.
Having said that, if you want to wait until after the in-camera comes to an end, there will be a report out after the in-camera meeting, but it will probably be vague in terms of direction was provided to staff.
Of course.
Okay. I don't know that for sure, but just
Okay.
telling, just
Thank you.
so you know. Now, the other thing that I want to say just before we start I guess I'll leave that till later. All right, so I'm calling for approval of the agenda, and Deputy Mayor Deschamps, I think you have that
I
motion.
do. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor John Hunter, that Municipal Council approves the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. You've heard the motion. Those in favor? Motion is carried. And just again, a little bit of an explanation. Council last met on March the 23rd. This Monday past, March the 30th, was sort of the fifth Monday of the month, which we're not, normally wouldn't have a meeting. So our next scheduled meeting of council was April the 13th. We felt it was a little bit too long in between the two meetings. And in addition to that, we've been given additional powers by the Minister of Municipal Affairs to hold meetings virtually, that is to say by remote, and those people that are in attendance at meetings remotely can be counted towards the quorum. So one of the main purposes of today's meeting is to change our procedural bylaw to reflect that change. So the agenda has been approved. Next item on the agenda is item number 3, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any disclosures here this afternoon?
None by me.
No disclosures indicated. And so I'm moving to item 4, which is discussion items, which is the emergency declaration that we've all seen. And I'm talking now about orders issued by the province under the declaration of the Act. And I had the staff circulate that. I just wanted it to be made part of the public record. That is the order. I think there's some 13 or 14 orders now that are issued under the Act, but that's the order which mandates us to close all of our outdoor recreation facilities, all of our parks, and we had hoped to be able to keep them operating, but under that order we have no choice. So that kind of explains why that item is on the agenda. I'm just opening it up. If anybody has any questions with regard to that, I'm just open that discussion right now for a brief few minutes. Anybody have anything that they wanted to bring forward as a result of that?
I just wanted to make mention that our township staff has closed off some of our recreation areas, the tennis courts area, of course the arenas, and of course the pavilion down along Legion Way, as well as a couple of other areas. And just for clarification as well from Mr. Spencer, is I believe the boat ramp is still operating. Is that correct?
Through the chair to you, yes, that is correct, Councillor Cameron. As of right now, the boat launch is open. The docks are not in though.
Correct. It's just the reason I'm asking is I just had a resident ask me, at one time there was some red tape around there and then it disappeared a couple hours later. Was that our people that did that and then take it back down?
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Through the mayor. The only comment I would have is, you know, going into that, handout on sheet 2, where it lists the things that are to be closed. It does indicate, you know, green spaces in parks, trails, and ravines, conservation areas that aren't otherwise closed would remain open for walk-through access. So, while all recreational facilities are closed, I believe dive site included at Conestoga, I think it's important to indicate that the walkways are still available and still open for people that need to get outside and exercise and have a little bit of a walk.
And I think that's a good clarification, and while we're leaving them open, I think it's clearly incumbent upon users to observe social safe distancing while they're using them. We do not, in these rural areas, have the same problem that they do in the cities, where people tend to congregate in those areas and don't always observe social distancing.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure that it's understood that they're left open, but with that sort of caveat in place.
Absolutely.
And we're expecting, speaking with the minister, we're expecting additional clarifications with regard to campgrounds later on today, possibly tomorrow, depending how soon the cabinet can deal with that specific issues. We have 3 campgrounds in our area. One is the Grenville campground, the other is the KOA, and then there's the one on County Road 44, can't remember the name.
Wildwood.
Wildwood. Now, clearly, Councillor Dillabaugh has had some correspondence with the folks from Grenville Park, and I'll just let you, if you would, Councillor, report on what you've heard from Grenville Park.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, actually he called me too after a couple emails yesterday. I was just concerned if he had full-time snowbirds coming there for April, which he doesn't. He opens up May 1st. The only thing is, everything's closed till April. He's telling me that his rules, they must have, well, I can read the email here, I think. We do not have any snowbirds, not as far as we're aware. Our seasonal contract requires our seasonal campers to have a permanent address, as we are a recreation campground, not a residential trailer park. That's how he worded it. I do believe there is a few there.
Yes, and
Okay.
that is the issue that the cabinet is dealing with yesterday, today, and until they get it resolved.
Right, now he has to have his water though, the trouble is too, he's playing with time here because we're close to the 30th of April. He must have his water and everything up and running 2 weeks before and have it tested and approved by the Minister of Health before he can even turn the key. So he's gonna do it the 15th of April, and I told him nothing's on until the 30th of April. He won't be doing it until the end of the month. But he is keeping in touch with us, and we'll update anything there. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so you can see that there are still a number of outstanding issues, and I think the one point that I want to stress as we go through this agenda today is that as of this point in time, this situation is being managed at the staff level, both county-wise and township-wise. And in my opinion, the management of the situation being left in their hands gives us, and in the hands of the council, because we meet regularly with them, gives us a great deal of control over the situation, and I'll speak more about that later. All right, moving on to item number 5A, which is the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, declaration of emergency orders and bylaw enforcement. And Councillor Hunter, you have, I think, something coming forward as a result of that.
Moved myself, seconded by Councillor Cameron. Municipal Council received Municipal Council received the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, declaration of emergency orders, bylaw enforcement information act. Deputy Mayor Dishon, seconded, Councillor Cameron.
Okay, thank you. So this motion is on the floor. I just want to say a few things with regard to this. So under one of the emergency orders that the province or the cabinet declared under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act was that bylaw enforcement officers, as a matter of fact, any enforcement officer is to be, has the ability to enforce orders that have been issued under the Act. Now, the reason that that was dealt with by the cabinet was because at the provincial level, the police were asking for additional help for enforcement. So this order was issued, but it doesn't particularly pertain, and again, in our township and our county. And as we learned at the Emergency Operations Center meeting, the County Emergency Operations Center meeting on Monday, from the Leeds inspector and reinforced by the inspector for the County of Grenville, they feel that their staffing levels are sufficient for them to conduct enforcement activities without the involvement of our bylaw enforcement officers. So that's why we have the recommendation here, and we have Councillor Hunter's motion, and so I'm going to call the motion for discussion. Does anyone have any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, go ahead.
Mayor.
Yes?
There isn't a recommendation though, I don't see it, just says that we don't feel that we're gonna do it, is that right?
Well, exactly. And
So there's not a recommendation. So are you saying that we're not gonna take any complaints? The 5 people, like the bylaw, if a taxpayer calls and says, hey, my neighbor's having a party?
well, the recommendation from the staff is that we don't have our bylaw officer enforcing that at this time. So in other words, if there were a group that were having a party, the enforcement officials would be the OPP. And so the place that they would call would be the OPP, not our bylaw enforcement officer. That's what's being recommended by staff. Now, again, the OPP tell us at our meeting that they have the ability to respond, and they would prefer, I might add, that they would prefer that they be the primary responders to those kinds of complaints, because they don't intend to deal with those kind of complaints on a heavy-handed manner and lay charges. What they intend to do is use those as opportunities for education, and they would prefer to keep that in their hands. So that's why you're seeing the recommendation as it comes forward from our staff, and Councillor Hunter's motion is written in such a way as that we're receiving this report and in effect endorsing that position as of this point in time. So if there's any contrary thought, now's the time to get it on the table.
Can you just read the motion?
Yes, so the motion is that Municipal Council receives the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act Declaration of Emergency Orders, bylaw enforcement item, information item. So we're receiving this information item from the staff. We're not acting on it, we're receiving it. But we're, the staff is telling you what their approach is. Council endorsed, by passing this motion, we endorse that approach until we change our minds.
And you're saying that at the emergency meeting of the counties, the OPP were fine with that. See, my belief was, I thought maybe they would get overrun by these complaints and they wouldn't want to take care of it. But if they're going to use it as an education system and they want to be involved in it, I'm all for it. But I just thought, a neighbor gets 10, 15 people at a party, maybe our bylaw officer could take the heat off the OPP. But
Well, clearly, under the change that was made, our bylaw officer would have the authority to enforce, but it's up to us to instruct our bylaw officer how, when, where, and why to react. And the staff is recommending to us that as of this point in time, we are not instructing our bylaw enforcement officer to react. Now, the staff makes it very clear in the second sentence, if OPP request additional resources, then enforcement should be on a complaint basis, not proactive. So, you know, again, this is a evolving situation, and by the time we sit here again, in the next meeting, that could have changed completely. But as of this point in time, this is the direction that we're endorsing. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, I'm about to call the question on the motion. Those in favor? Motion is carried. So, as of this point in time, you see groups, the complaint is to the OPP. And I'll be talking, by the way, just so you know, I will be talking to the Grenville County Inspector sometime in the near future, just to reinforce that that's the approach that we've taken for the present time. And I will be inviting her, if they need assistance, to get in touch with the CAO, and we will take a different approach. But remember that if we take that a different approach, there are implications. Number one, we will definitely have to increase the bylaw enforcement officer's hours per week beyond the 10, because he will then be on call to deal with these situations. So that's a council decision as of this point in time. Okay, so now I'm moving on with item number 5B, request for CBOID 19 support, community grants and donations. And I think that Councillor Dillabaugh, you have that motion.
I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Cameron, that the Municipality Council approves and directs staff to donate $500 to the Connect Youth and $1,000 to the Fund for Food Bank from the Community Grants and Donation Program.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this one's fairly clear. Discussion, if any. Hearing none, those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. And so now I'm moving on to item number 5C. Just a minute to get my paperwork in order here. And provincial emergency declaration, limits to public gatherings, postponement of public meetings. And Deputy Mayor Deschamps, I believe you have an issue.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor John Hunter, that Municipal Council receives the provincial emergency declaration, limits to public gatherings, information item.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think this has to do with the fact that we had, as a council, approved April the 22nd as a date for a meeting, a public meeting, which was to be held under the Planning Act. And the staff had the notice ready to go to the paper the night, and it was to go, the night before they were prepared to send it to the paper, the province declared that there were to be no public gatherings of more than 5 people. And clearly, for us to hold a public meeting after that order had just been issued would have been counterproductive to the order. And I want to thank CAO Grant for bringing that to my attention the next morning, because clearly it would have been the wrong thing to do. But I want council to know that I spoke to the proponent here that needs the zoning bylaw amendment, and he understands totally that this may cost him a sale, but he understands totally council's reluctance to call a public meeting under the Planning Act in view of the fact that we'd be flying in the face of a provincial order. So just want to put that on the table so council understands that there's been full communication all the way around. Any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none. Those in favor? Motion is carried. And item number 6D on the agenda is the status update for the flood mitigation measures. Councillor Cameron.
I think that's 5D, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, it is.
And yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Hunter that Municipal Council receives the status update flood mitigation measures information item.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll have more to say about this later, but at this point, we're just receiving the report. Any questions? Councillor?
Just want to know, clarification, Mr. CEO, is there,
Through the chair.
CEO, through the chair, is there any follow-up out of the 110 letters we sent? Did we get any response from any of the people that we sent letters out to?
Through the chair, those letters that just went out a couple days ago, so I expect that we'll have some follow-up. We were a little later on getting the letters out than anticipated.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Through the chair to this, were you done?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you.
Through the chair of the CAO. In the paragraph says there are no full sandbags in stock at this time. Did we have somebody come in and get some full sandbags? I thought at one of the meetings that Mr. Guest indicated that they did have some filled, ready to go. Am I mistaken in thinking that?
Through the chair, I believe that I may have indicated that, and it would appear that I was mistaken in that end of it.
Okay, so, I think it is important to note from the briefing note that we do have 25,000 empty sandbags in stock. And I think it's also important to note that I do notice, at least one load of sand having been dumped someplace along County Road 2, east of Johnstown, so it's in proximity to folks that have riverside properties. And there may have been others, maybe CIO could say more.
If I may, yes. So the locations right now where sand has been dropped off are County Road 2 and Hilltop, at the end of North Channel, right before Tuttle Point, and Blair Road near Bay Lane. And all three of those locations actually have signage up indicating, asking individuals to practice physical distancing at that time. Plus we have sand at the Works Garage in Cardinal.
Okay, so any further questions here? Okay, hearing none, about to call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. And so now I get to the bylaws, and actually, we have two main bylaws here which constitute really the major reason for the special meeting. So bylaw 6A, which is a bylaw to amend bylaw 2020-11, Councillor Cameron.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Hunter that the mover be granted leave to introduce a bylaw to amend bylaw 2020-11 to authorize an interim tax levy in advance of the adoption of the tax rates for 2020, and this shall constitute the first and second reading thereof.
Very good. The motion is on the floor, and as everyone knows, the intent of this bylaw is to postpone the tax due date from March the 31st to May the 31st. Further discussion, if any? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
That bylaw has been carried unanimously on first and second reading, and it can proceed to third reading, Councillor.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dillabaugh that a bylaw to amend bylaw 2020-11 to authorize an interim tax levy in advance of the adoption of the tax rates for 2020 be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 2025.
Thank you very much. Third reading, those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. And so now it's official, the tax deadline has been extended to May 31st. And just before I move on, I'm just gonna ask if the treasurer would just give us an update on what we saw as of March the 31st. And whether or not she's been getting a lot of calls for extended payment plans.
Sure, sure. Through the chair, I've done a tax receivable report in comparison from this year, March 31st to last year. The difference is minor, in terms of total $850,000 difference. I also did a little bit of a cursory review of the unpaid taxes that are outstanding, and some of our large commercial industrial accounts total about 812 of that 850.
812?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we're pretty much close to where we were last year, other than that, the couple of commercial and industrial partners that have not paid that March interim. So I think for the most part, we're in pretty good shape that way.
Okay, and so just further to that, I spoke to one of our large commercial manufacturers yesterday, and he said, Pat, I can cash flow this money right now, but I'd prefer to hold it until May the 31st if you don't mind. I said, well, the bylaw will be coming before council on this meeting, and it will probably pass. But I just want to assure you that that particular manufacturer does have the cash. It's not a question of that risk. So, and I think you're gonna find that all of the large manufacturers are gonna take roughly, all of the large industrials are gonna take advantage of that because it does affect their cash flow. So I appreciate that little bit of an update. And I'm moving on now then to 6B, which is to amend the procedural bylaw 2019-15. And Deputy Mayor Deschamps, you have that motion.
I do. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor John Hunter, that the mover be granted leave to introduce a bylaw to amend bylaw 2019-15, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and committees of council. And this shall constitute the first and second reading thereof.
Okay, thank you very much. And this is the bylaw which will enable us to not only hold electronic meetings, but to count the people that are participating remotely as part of quorum. So, further discussion on this bylaw, if any? And I'm just going to make one comment, and it'll be short. First of all, my entire life, I have advocated against electronic meetings because I think it does a disservice to our service folks who work so hard to earn these rights for us. However, this is very unusual times, and I think I have to bend now because certainly the province has given us the right to not only hold these electronic meetings but to count the people that are participating as quorum, and so I bend in the face of COVID-19. Now, any further discussion on this bylaw? Hearing none. About to call a question on first and second reading. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried unanimously, and Deputy Mayor can proceed to third reading.
That a bylaw, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor John Hunter, that a bylaw to amend bylaw 2019-15, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and committees of council, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 2020-26.
Okay, thank you very much. Those in favor?
Hold on, just.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, just, it's more of a comment than anything. I thought we had to wait until third reading for comments. So, mine is, and I think that it's, you're bending because of that, and I believe that electronic participation in light of COVID-19 is a good idea for any chance that we need to use that. And reading through this, it's the way that I read this, that it is only, that bylaw is only in effect until this state of emergency ends. Am I correct in that thinking?
Well, I think what is only in effect is the new section that's being added to the bylaw.
Correct.
And if you'll notice in the wording of the bylaw, under item number 2, under the operative clause, it says that the procedural bylaw 2019-15 be amended by adding section 107. So it's section 107 of the amended bylaw, which will be in effect only when there is a declaration of emergency under the Act. And that can be a declaration either at the provincial level or a declaration at the municipal level.
And so from, again, just through the chair, for my own clarification, again, once the province has extended that emergency declaration until, I believe, the 15th or the 14th, once that emergency declaration, if it could be continued again for another 2 weeks or another 14 days, but this only pertains as long as there is a state of emergency in effect.
That's correct.
That's good.
Okay, so I still have your motion in front of me. About to call the question on the motion for third reading. Those in favor?
Aye.
The motion is carried, thank you. And so that section 107 becomes now part of our procedural bylaw. And our procedural bylaw will be adjusted accordingly. All right, now, we have a few minutes left to deal with item number 7, under council inquiries or notices of motion. Anything that council wants to bring up, I'm going to call for the motion to go into closed session. I'll call for that motion at about 1:40. So we have 10 minutes, if anyone has anything to bring up under council inquiries or notices of motion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I have speakers here, and I'll recognize Councillor Cameron, then Deputy Mayor Deschamps, and then Councillor Hunter, in that order. So Councillor Cameron,
Yes, thank you, Mr.
and
Mayor.
then Councillor Dillabaugh.
I believe we all got the email this morning. There was a resident of our township sent an email to, I believe, all of us, requesting a no charge on garbage bags throughout this virus epidemic, indicating that things are going up in price, specifically groceries, and I guess this particular individual may be finding things difficult. I answered his email that I would bring it forward at our meeting today. His timing was right on by coming through this morning. So I told the person that I would bring it up for discussion and get the feeling of the balance of council to discuss it and possibly make a decision. I've just covered what was in the email, so I guess the wording is I open it or leave it open now for council to discuss the.
Okay, so before we proceed to discussion on that item, what I am going to do, you've put an issue on the table.
I have.
Okay, I'm going to suspend discussion on that issue until I hear from the other speakers to see if they've got additional or different issues to bring up. And then we'll come back to your issue if there's still time before the in-camera session. If there isn't time before the in-camera session, we'll come back to it after. But you have an issue on the table. I'm going now to Deputy Mayor Deschamps.
Were you finished?
Yes, I am.
No
Yes,
other ones?
at that
Okay.
point I'm finished. Yes.
Okay, so I have two real quick ones. The first one's a thank you to staff during this difficult time. There was a time-sensitive issue with the osprey nest. I just want to thank everyone for the follow-up and ultimately the cleanup of that issue. Thank you and well done, even during these difficult times. Next question that I've received from a few people is, will spring leaf and brush cleanup continue as normal, and will they be the regular collection dates? And if so, just for clarification, what will those dates be?
So to the CAO.
If I may, Mr. Chair, maybe we could hold this one off until we have.
Okay, fair enough.
Anything else, because
Same discussion?
I think so.
Okay, and so another issue on the table, I'll hold that issue.
That's all for me.
Councillor Hunter.
I just have one quick issue. It's been in a few places listed that half loads restrictions were on our roads and they were staying on until April 1st. We generally left them on a lot longer than April 1st. Are we taking the half load restrictions off on the 1st of April, which was yesterday?
Okay, so quick answer from the CAO, yes or no? Or further discussion, your choice.
I'm going to say further discussion, because basically, I don't have that information available at this time.
Okay, we will postpone that temporarily then. And Councillor Dillabaugh.
I just, same thing I was gonna bring up about, the garbage bags with the email today, and yes, you're welcome, Deputy Mayor, for the cleanup of that. I just involved in that.
Nobody wants to recognize that the mayor put the pressure on Reno St. Lawrence.
And there's nothing there.
Okay, all right, so there's 3 issues to be discussed in a little bit more detail. Have 5 minutes left. Let's get to the issue of the garbage bags first. And I think the request was to relieve the cost or reduce the cost, or I don't know what specifically. I saw that email.
Do you want it, Mr. Mayor?
Well, just read that email out louder then if you have it in front of you.
Would you consider the dropping cost of garbage pickup for the residents of Edwardsburg Cardinal until the coronavirus is over?
Okay, so this has financial implications. I don't know what the extent of the issue is. That's one request from one individual. I'm going to give the CAO a chance, and then I want to give the treasurer a chance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there are going to be a number of these items that come to light over the next few weeks, if not longer. I think we need to really take a holistic view of what some of those financial impacts would be with those decisions, try to gather up some data so that we can make an informed decision on some of these particular items when it comes to relief.
Rather than acting precipitously.
Rather than acting on one-offs, take a more holistic point of view with respect to a number of these programs and services
And to the treasurer?
I reiterate what the CIO is saying. I think he and I have had several discussions as of late, and I think right now we're in, I don't think the impact of COVID has hit any one of our people to a great extent at this moment. We don't know what the future will impact and who it will impact. And I think we have to look at things a little bit more under a microscope to understand who's impacted. If we just blanket everybody, then all we're gonna do is disservice to everyone, because as everybody knows, our money comes from the taxpayer. So if we're trying to provide services and we have a reduction in those funds, that will impact services. Right now, financially, we're in really good shape. We're not far off from where we were last year at this time. So I don't think we as a township have hit that point, but unless we start looking at what we want to do and create a plan to buffer ourselves for the next part of this pandemic, we would be doing ourselves and our taxpayers a disservice if we just say, yeah, we're going to do this, and not have a holistic or an end goal approach to things.
Okay, further discussion. I think what I'm hearing from the staff is that they would prefer to park this issue at least temporarily. And not saying that it's going away or that it's going to be ignored. I think Councillor can get back to the person that sent him the email and say that it was brought up for discussion, and unless I hear to the contrary, it'll be tabled until the next meeting.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just respond to that. I had sent our CAO a copy of the email requesting that we do discuss this today and under what area it should be brought up, and the CAO got back to me to bring it up under where we did. However, I think because the township is going to be looking at a number of different situations, I think the township should answer the gentleman instead of it coming from myself.
Okay, so you forwarded the email to the CAO?
I did.
So do you feel comfortable responding to that email?
I certainly expect that I will feel more comfortable at the conclusion of the meeting.
Okay, all right, now it's about 2 minutes until 1:40, so I'm gonna suspend discussion on the last two items for now, and I am gonna ask for the motion to go into the closed session to come forward at this point. And who's got the motion to come forward?
Move myself, second by Deputy Mayor Deschamps, the council proceed in the closed session at 1:40 p.m. in order to address a matter pertaining to advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose, specifically human resources.
Okay, motion to go into closed session. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried, and we'll just have a little short period of time while the CAO gets us set up here.
Deputy Mayor Deschamps, the closed meeting is now adjourned and open meeting of council is now resumed at 3:13 p.m.
Back we go, Mr. Mayor. Okay. I'll wait until she comes back.
Is this, are we having a little rest?
First of all, those in favor?
Yep.
Okay, so that's carried. Okay, 5-minute break.
Yep.
Call the meeting back to order. So the first thing I'm going to do is report out from the closed session. And so reporting out from the closed session, we held a long and very detailed discussion with our solicitor. And as a result of certain directions were provided to staff. And so now I'm going back to item number 7 on the agenda, which were council inquiries or notices of motion. And there were 2 issues that were parked temporarily. The first one that of course, we decided that the issue of the garbage bags would be deferred at least until the next meeting of council. So then the next one was the spring leaf brush collection, and the question was, will that proceed, and if so, what are the time frames? So that's the next item up. And I think you had, Mr. CEO, you had asked for some input into this, so what is your current thinking?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that particular topic will fit well into the report as the direction was given.
Right, and so my question is, what is the normal time for that collection to take place?
The Chair, I believe it's typically early May. I want to say it's either the end of April and then in 2 weeks, and then mid-May. It's in around that time frame.
Okay,
Something rings the bell in the first week of May, and then I think 2 weeks after.
okay, so I think it's safe to say that, as you indicate, it'll be, this matter will be discussed in the report which you're going to be preparing, and I think it's safe to say dates to be determined.
That would be a fair statement.
Now, is there any questions?
Yes.
Jessica, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to be clear, Mr. Mayor, that on the issue of the garbage bag, that is going to be deferred to a council meeting or administration meeting.
It'll come back at the next meeting, which will be the administration meeting on whatever the date was.
Okay, in that case then, Mr. Mayor, what I will do, I will notify the individual personally, myself, or I don't mean personally, I mean by email, and then perhaps the final email could possibly come from the township after the administration and finance.
Okay, so Mr. Grant should not feel obligated to answer that at this point?
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
I will handle that, thank you.
All right, so now we're down to the third issue, which was the half-load restrictions.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chair, the scheduled time for the half loads to come off is May 1st.
May the 1st. So was there some misinformation there someplace? Was that our normal date?
I'm not 100% sure. All I asked for was the scheduled date for the half loads to come off. And it was May 1st.
So Councillor Hunter, is that the normal date?
Well, generally around there, but it was listed on our website at April 1st, so.
Okay, so that actually may very well just have been an error in the date. We'll get that corrected on the website.
Because I've had numerous inquiries, one today in particular that come in wondering if you could take a full load, so.
Okay, so the answer is
No.
not until May 1st.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now I'm still at item number 7. That sort of deals with the 3 issues that were brought up during the first round. Are there any other issues to be brought up at this point before I proceed up to the item 8 on the agenda? Okay, so if there's none, then I'm going to item 8 on the agenda. And so the first item under my agenda is the MPAC update. I just wanted everyone to have that and to be aware of it. It has very significant implications for us insofar as the the January 1st, 2020 base date has now been postponed, at least until January 1st, 2021. And we know for sure that our assessment base for 2021 will be basically the same as it was for 20, except for the supplementaries. Is that correct? And the supplementaries will come in during the course of this year.
Yes, and typically they come in monthly. I anticipate the first one to come in April is the deadline, or is one of the notices that I've been received, that I have received. But we don't have to process that sub as soon as it comes in. We do have some time to process. We could potentially process it in May and have it due after the May deadline, so that doesn't get confused with the May deadline that we have reset.
So when you say process, you mean send out the tax bills?
Correct,
On that supplementary assessment?
correct.
Yes, but that supplementary assessment will definitely become an add-on to our base assessment when we get into 2021.
Yes, it will adjust the roll when it returns to us, yes.
Okay, all right, so that's the first thing. Second thing I want to make council aware of is that yesterday, the Minister Clark announced something called the Social Services Relief Fund. Now, it's $148 million that will be given to social service managers for very specific purposes, and I'm just going to take a minute to explain a little bit about this, because the United Counties will receive $1,553,000 under this special Social Services Relief Fund. And the reason I'm doing this is because you may know individuals within the community who have or operate programs, or know people that operate programs that can take advantage of this. This investment will allow communities to expand a wide range of services and supports for vulnerable populations based on local need, so they can better respond to this emergency situation. This investment complements additional resources provided by the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services to directly support individuals and families in financial crisis who are not able to access federal assistance. So if you know anybody in that category, this is where it's targeted. I am pleased to announce under the Relief Fund, United Counties of Leeds and Granville will receive $1,553,000. To ensure this investment is delivered as quickly as possible and to provide maximum flexibility for local needs, we will be providing funding through the Community Hopelessness Prevention Initiative. Now that's the CHIPPE initiative that we talk about at Joint Social Services on a monthly basis. The current target is during the week of April the 6th, you'll receive 50% of the money. You'll be able to immediately respond to the crisis. Please, I'm not going to go into that, but I would like to stress that this expanded funding is intended to allow you to help a diverse range of vulnerable people in need in your community. This includes people living in community housing, supportive housing, people with low incomes, social assistance recipients, and others who require social services support, as well as those that are experiencing homelessness. So I've talked to Mayor Malanka, who's on the board of Connect Youth, made him aware of it. I've talked to Bonnie at the food shelter, made her aware of it, and if there are any other folks that you know that we should be targeting through United Counties social service manager, you should let me know so that I can point those individuals or those situations out to Allison Tutak at the United Counties. Won't say anything more about that. Anybody wants copies of the actual program and the announcements, you can get them either from me or from Mr. Brown. Now, the last thing I want, or two last things actually. I just want to report briefly on Mapleview Manor. So as you know, in the United Counties, there are 2 long-term care homes. The first is the St. Lawrence Lodge in Brockville, and the second, which is operated basically by Brockville, and how shall I say this, supported by the Joint Services, funded through the Joint Services Committee. That's where the money comes through. And then there's the Mapleview Manor in Athens, which is directly looked after by the county. I just want to assure everybody that the administrators of both of those long-term care homes have taken absolutely extraordinary steps quite some weeks ago to protect the residents of those 2 long-term care homes. They've curtailed visits. They've put in place all kinds of protocols so that there is minimal contact between residents and staff, etc. And one of the drastic moves that they've taken, which is not helping, because their major risk right now is availability of staff. But in the model that many of them were using, they had a lot of part-time personal care workers. So the personal care worker might work 24 hours or 27 hours a week at Mapleview, and then a number of other hours a week at Brockville General, St. Vincent, whatever. So one of the things that they've done is they've said, okay, we're going to have to curtail that in order to reduce the exposure. So can you give up your hours, for example, at St. Vincent and work full-time for us at Mapleview? And there's a lot of that kind of trading going on to minimize exposures. So Andy Brown and I are in contact almost on a daily basis, myself through Andy Brown, with the administrators at Mapleview and at St. Lawrence Lodge, just to see what their immediate needs are. There doesn't seem to be any needs from the point of view, well, there's always the mask problem, and they're worried about where they're going to get enough masks, but the major risk is going to be losing staff members because they have to be off for a period of sickness. So just put that out. And then the last thing I want to make you aware of is that, again, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, our Emergency Operations Center, which we're using this room right now, we will be standing up our Municipal Emergency Control Group for their 3rd Friday meeting, which will be to analyze our situation in the township and determine whether or not we are in a position or any need to declare an emergency. We've resisted doing that up to this point in time because our staff is handling this extremely well. But I did mention earlier that I'm anticipating that Westport may declare an emergency. And the reason for that is that up to this point in time, Westport has not declared an emergency. And because they have not declared an emergency, the folks from Kingston are saying, well, there's no real problem in Westport. So there's a tremendous number of people coming from Kingston into the Westport stores, and they don't seem to be observing the social distancing. They don't seem to be observing the question of, only 1 or 2 people in a small shop at a time. They're coming into the pharmacy in large numbers. And the merchants in Westport are saying, these people from away are not observing the same kinds of protocols that we in the village are observing, and we need you to declare an emergency so that the people from away get the message. So I think that's what's motivating Mayor Jones to move in that direction, and she will then be the 5th township in the United Counties to declare. So that's basically my report. I don't know whether there's a motion to
There is.
receive the mayor's report.
I have it moved by myself, seconded by Councilor John Hunter, that municipal council receives the mayor's report as presented.
Okay, those in favor?
Yep.
Motion is carried, thank you. And as well, the United Counties Emergency Emergency Control Group will meet on Monday at 9 again. All right, so now the closed session is over, and we have reported out from the closed session. So I'm looking for the confirmatory bylaw, Councillor Cameron.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry. Question, did I miss, oh, I missed the question period. Sorry, good question period. My problem.
Just a couple of quick things. Yes, I would like a copy of that relief fund statement. And the sites where you said that the sand has already been dropped for bagging, there were 3. Are they
That's what the
two
CAO
that are-
reported, yes.
Okay, because I got 2 of them. It says here, will be arranged by, but you said that 3 have already been done.
Well, I saw 1,
Yeah.
and the CAO is telling me the other 2 are confirmed?
Correct. At the time of writing the report, the sand was not in those locations.
Okay.
At the time that I'm presenting now, the sand is at those locations.
Okay.
And to the press again, do you have all 3 locations?
No, which 3 did you mention?
They are in
The 3 that are in here? Okay.
In the information item, yes.
Okay, sorry, it was just
No.
difficult from behind you. No, but for information's sake, I want to say I did not try to contravene your confidentiality. I came in to take a call from my office and I could not hear anything. I will sign a waiver to that effect.
We
And I
didn't
would-
know you were in the building.
Yes, I just stepped inside to take a call.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to know if the haircut tonight will be streamed.
Oh, there you go, Facebook Live.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Well, we'll see before and after.
Ah,
We'll take a before and
I'll watch for
after.
that,
I'll
okay.
put it on Facebook for you.
Okay, no, that's everything I have,
It is.
thank you.
Okay. Mr.
Oh,
CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just because this is a little different setup, it didn't really have an opportunity to, so I'm gonna use question period if I may. Just with respect to the community grants and donations, we would typically have that on the 13th. I'm wondering if it would be, if we should postpone that a month, because typically we would have a large number of individuals here to see if they, you know, with their grants and how much they would be getting. And I think it just would be better if we could push that back a month.
Okay, so what's the feeling around the table here on that? See him nodding of heads.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think as well, we'll have a full agenda that day anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so, just to, a quick question, if I may, to the clerk. Have you been getting people calling, asking?
I have, yes. A number of local community groups that have submitted their applications have followed up within the last 3 days, asking if it's still taking place on that day. And I've told them that we're waiting for council's decision.
Okay, so can you tell us if there are any of those groups that are, what I might say, time sensitive, time critical?
Not at this point. A lot of them are just local groups looking for their normal every year funding.
Yeah.
The one that was asking has now been dealt with today. Of course, they did also apply for a regular grant as well,
Okay.
so that could be something brought up in the future if need be.
Okay. Well, I think the intention was that those 2 that we allocated today would be from that
Correct.
fund, yeah. And of course, now we know that the province has put this extra 1.5 million out. Those 2 groups will now be able to get into that 1.5 million, so that's good. There was one other point. I would hope that when you're getting questions from people about when will we do this, and in every conversation that all of your folks have, that you would stress to folks that although we have not declared an emergency, this is a different kind of situation, and staff time is going to be dedicated to this issue rather than to normal day-to-day activity. I mean, I think that you've got to protect yourselves that way. Certainly, we've put an awful lot on you, we understand that, but protect yourselves by explaining to the public that don't expect normal sort of service levels, if I can put it that way.
Just one more, I think the treasurer has one with respect to the extension of the interim tax bill.
Right. Yes, through the chair, I just wanted to seek clarification. So with the extension bylaw, that basically extended the March tax bill payment to May, which basically, I know at one point we were talking about interest, and I think that that's been resolved with the extension of the bylaw, but are we still, is it just that payment that's extended to May 31st, or are we waiving interest on all payments, prior year arrears as such?
Whoa,
Mhm.
Whoa.
I have the ability to differentiate between that, and so if you only are interested in extending the deadline, which is what we have done, then I can modify the deadline within the system, and it doesn't start calculating on the March billing until after May, but we can still calculate on anybody who was in arrears for prior years.
well, let me put it this way, that issue was not dealt with in the change to the bylaw.
That's right,
So I think you're governed by what's in effect,
okay.
because it not, you know, council did not have any advice to move otherwise.
Right, I just wanted clarification in the public so that people, if anybody who has arrears gets interest, that they realize it's interest on their arrears and not on the March payment.
Right, and my understanding is that if somebody is in arrears, and they come through the door or phone up to say what their balance is, they're always paying the farthest back first, principal plus interest, before the residual is applied to current, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so, I mean, that's the normal, and
Stay the
we have not provided any direction out of the norm.
Just wanted clarification, just so that, you know, everybody was understanding that there will still be interest earned or
Yeah.
calculated on arrears.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Did I see the confirmatory bylaw?
I have it anytime we get there.
Oh. Are you suggesting that I'm procrastinating?
No, not at all,
No,
Mr. Mayor,
not.
not at all.
Could I have the confirmatory bylaw, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dillabaugh that a bylaw to adopt, confirm, ratify matters dealt with by resolution be now passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 2020-27.
All right, those in favor of the confirmatory bylaw?
Aye.
That bylaw is carried, thank you. And now the motion to adjourn.
Moved by myself, second by Councilor Cameron, that the municipality council does now adjourn at 3:43 PM.
Well done. All right, those in favor? Motion is carried.